densely in the area, and multiple calls to CHP were received of this suspect. He then drove into the parking lot of this business and losing a tire on his vehicle. He continued driving to the rear of the business where his vehicle became disabled, and he then attempted entry into the back of the business. Employees inside the business were able to keep the door shut, and the suspect then ran around to the front of the business where he attempted to gain entry into a vehicle in the parking lot. Multiple patrons were at the business and observed this activity and went to confront him as he was attempting to break out the window to a vehicle. When the patrons confronted the suspect, he then pulled a firearm from his waistband and pointed it at the patrons. At this point, an off-duty sheriff's deputy was there when this occurred and witnessed the incident. He then challenged the suspect, and an exchange of gunfire resulted with the suspect going down. The deputy was then able to remove a patron from the area and then saw that the suspect was still armed with his firearm and pointing the firearm at him. The deputy then exchanged gunfire one more time with the suspect, and the suspect was ultimately pronounced deceased at the scene. A firearm was located from the suspect, and we are still conducting further investigation related to this call.
So was the suspect under the influence of any kind of substance, or is there any indication that something was driving his behavior?
At this point, the suspect was extremely erratic, both in his driving and both in what he did in the parking lot. However, it's going to take a toxicology test through an autopsy to determine what was in his system.
Do you know how many calls were made to CHP prior to him going into the Tony's parking lot?
Do we know? At this point, we don't. We know it was at least 2 calls of people witnessing him, but we believe that it was more. We're still attempting to get those phone calls.
An exchange of gunfire means the suspect's weapon was discharged?
Yes, the suspect did fire his weapon towards our deputy.
And just for clarification, sir, after the first exchange of gunfire, what was it that made the officer then, or the sheriff's deputy, I should say, go back over and discharge his weapon the second time? Was there an imminent danger to him and those in the surrounding area?
There was. The suspect had fired his weapon. The suspect was still armed with his weapon. The deputy tried to get the patron out of the way, out of harm's way first, and then he went back to, again, either take custody of the suspect, take control of the suspect, or that's what he attempted to do, and then when he located the suspect was still armed, refused to put the firearm down, and it appears pointed at the deputy again.
What is the department's stance on an off-duty deputy, stepping in a situation like this?
Deputies, law enforcement in general, are officers 24/7. They're allowed to carry their firearms off-duty, both their either personal firearms or department firearms off-duty, and that's what happened in this case.
And then I know his vehicle had some issues with it. Was that the reason he went to Tony's parking lot, or did he go into the parking lot and then started having issues with the vehicle? So I guess was Tony's the target, or was it just happened to be, his car was breaking down and it was right there?
We believe his car was breaking down and it just happened to be right there. It does appear that the tire fell off before he entered the parking lot, so he was having problems with the vehicle, was able to turn in there, went towards the back of the building where it finally became fully disabled.
This being an officer-involved shooting, tell us a little bit about the investigation that's going to be ongoing.
So this was initially a joint investigation between the Bakersfield Police Department and the Kern County Sheriff's Office. Due to this being a Kern County Sheriff's deputy that was involved, the Kern County Sheriff's Office took over the investigation, as we do with all of our officer-involved shootings. As part of this process, we speak with witnesses. We try to gather any type of video evidence that might be available, and also speak with the officer himself. Once that is all completed, then the case is ultimately submitted over to the District Attorney's Office for review.
What's his status right now, the officer?
The officer was placed on, or the deputy was placed on paid administrative leave at this time, pending the outcome of the investigation.
Is that routine?
That is routine, yes.
This question is directly from my news director. She was wondering if we would have the opportunity to speak with the deputy.
At this point, no. At this point, the deputy is still assisting with our investigation. So at this point, no, the deputy is unavailable for comment.
Did you know if the man who died, was that his gun?
It was the gun that he was in possession of. We don't know who the gun at this point belonged to, but the suspect was in possession of that gun prior to and during the shooting.
Do you have an approximate physical description of the suspect?
The suspect is going to be a Hispanic male, I believe mid-30s, on his age. There were no civilians or the officer, or there were no injuries to the officer or the civilians.
Do you know how many of the patrons confronted him before the officer and the deputy got involved?
At this point, I don't have that information.
Is it possible, or do you know if the officer had been drinking that night? Because obviously he was off duty.
We do not believe that he had not been drinking at that time. Good.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
So your name
Oh,
and
I'm sorry.
title.
Joel Swanson, JoelSwanson, Lieutenant with the Kern County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Appreciate your time.